Hello everyone. Welcome to another live broadcast with us at Project Control Academy. Very glad to have you joining us today. We have an exciting session lined up for you today, and we are going live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook channels. So if you're joining us from either of these channels, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. Now, for today, let me ask a question. Who is ready to embark on an exciting journey into the world of project planning scheduling? And have you ever wondered what it takes to thrive in project controls and unlock a successful career in project planning scheduling? Well, we are going to answer these questions today, and we're going to cover a lot about project planning and scheduling career. By the end of this session, you're going to explore what makes a good project planner scheduler, some potential career paths available for project planner schedulers, and how you can stay ahead of the curve. Also, we are going to discuss about the current and future trends in the industry for project planning and scheduling, and also what essential skills you need to acquire to be able to be ready for all these evolutions that are coming on our way, especially for planners, schedulers, and much, much more. So these are some of the topics that we're going to cover today. So ready to embark on this great journey into the world of project planning and scheduling. So if you are ready to get started, please go ahead, get engaged in the conversation. If you haven't done so already, please introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know who you are, what your role is, and from which country you are tuning in from. My fantastic special guest is watching you behind the scenes, so please show some love. Start your introduction and tell us who you are and whether or not you're a planner or scheduler. So we want to get a feeling about our fantastic audience today. Also, may I ask for a quick favor? If you don't mind clicking on repost button or reshare this post with your connection so others can also join this conversation and benefit from this great discussion that we're going to have. I really appreciate if you spread the word about it and just click on the repost button so others can join you and learn from these great discussions and have a better knowledge and insights into project planning and scheduling. About me, I am Shorek Orbani. I'm the founder and technical director of Project Control Academy, which is the leading global provider of practical and comprehensive online training programs in project controls. And today I have a very special guest that I cannot wait to introduce to you. But before that, just make sure you engage in the conversation as we start this session. It's going to be a casual conversation on the topic, and it's meant to add value to each one of you. Once in a while, we bring an expert and talk about a topic that can serve our global community. So these sessions are meant for you to add value to you. So please engage in the conversation as we start the discussion. Have your questions coming, or if you want to comment or help others, please do. Or if you have a question, we will make sure that you cover your question throughout the conversation. So don't be shy of asking questions and get help from the fantastic guest speaker that we have today. And let's see, before I introduce my fantastic guest, let's see who is here on here so I can say some hi's there. So I see you guys there. Thank you so much for joining us. And perhaps Ridona from, oh, bonjour. So yeah, bonjour. Thanks for joining us. We also see Antonio joining us from the aerospace and defense industry from Arizona. Welcome, Anthony. Thanks for joining us. We also have Blas joining us from Mexico. That's amazing. Thanks for joining us here. We also have a project manager joining us. I don't know from where, but thank you for joining us. We also have Fabio joining us from Brazil. Wow, that's amazing. Thanks for joining us here. We also have Lana joining us and Omar joining us here from Azerbaijan. Very glad to have you, Omar, here. And finally, what I see here is Modin joining us from India, Satish also joining us, Satisha joining us here. So yeah, please have the conversation going and start the introduction and tell us also your role and what you do and why you joined this session. I also see Engineer Nisar from Saudi Arabia joining us. Very glad to have you all joining us here. So now about today's fantastic guest that we have. You are here for a great deal and great treat because my guest speaker brings profound knowledge and insights into project planning scheduling as the group director of project planning scheduling in his current role, and also the chair of AACE International Planning and Scheduling Committee. So please help me give a big warm welcome to our fantastic speaker today, Daniel Gilmour, who is joining us today. Welcome, Daniel, to this virtual stage, and we cannot wait to hear from you and learn from you today.
Thanks so much. It's an honor to be here with everybody.
Yes, thank you so much, Daniel, for joining us. So to get started again, I haven't introduced you properly. Let us know a little bit about yourself, Daniel, how you got started in project planning, scheduling, and what your background is. Thank you, Daniel.
Sure. So I went to school at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I graduated with a degree in civil engineering. While in school, I knew I definitely wanted to get into construction management. I toyed around in environmental engineering, things like that. And ultimately, the way I grew up and the things I was most interested in, I wanted to build buildings. I wanted to do cool things, build cool things. So unfortunately, when I graduated, it was right in the middle of a recession here in the U.S. And at that time, really the only contractors that were hiring were civil contractors, heavy civil construction contractors. So that's where I began my career. I worked for a large heavy civil contractor in New York City for several years. Basically a typical construction management training program for a young engineer. Started in estimating, planned to be rotated into the field and into more of a assistant project manager role. But given the time period and the jobs that were coming out, I got stuck in estimating essentially. And there came an opportunity about 2 years in to get out of estimating and getting into the field, which is where I really wanted to be. And that opportunity was to go prove myself as a scheduler, which is not something that I had really learned in school other than an assignment here or there. It was not necessarily something that I was very interested in, but I did want to get out of the office. I did want to get my boots dirty, and I wanted to be out on a construction project. So I took that opportunity and really kind of learned the trade in heavy civil construction on a really large rail project in Queens, New York, that really set the tone for my career going forward. From there, I spent some time as a schedule consultant, a claims consultant in New York City. And in 2015, I moved with my family here to Atlanta, Georgia, to work on the Atlanta Braves baseball stadium for Brassfield and Gorey. And I've been with Brassfield and Gorey ever since. So B&G is a large general contractor that does everything from heavy civil to traditional building, data center, healthcare, hospitals. You name it, we kind of do it. We pride ourselves in the diversity of the work that we do. So right now I'm the group director of the East Group planning and scheduling. So I oversee all of our scheduling in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. And as Shora mentioned, I've had the honor over the past year to serve as the chair of AACE's Planning and Scheduling Technical Subcommittee, which is a huge honor, a humbling honor for me. AACE has played a huge role in my career and where I'm at. So to sit in that chair is it's a heavy responsibility, but it's one that I'm honored to have.
I was muted. Thank you so much, Daniel, for shedding more light about your career and how you got started. So I didn't know you were heavily involved in estimating and then moved to planning scheduling, but really an honor having you today here. So I know you are very passionate about project planning, but can you tell us what is the best part about this role as a project planner scheduler? What is so good about it and why you're so passionate about this field?
So for me, it's three things. It's interactions, it's the influence that you can have, and it's living at this intersection of old school construction methodologies and the new school, kind of sticks and bricks, traditional construction meets data analytics, which is something that means a lot to me to be challenged there. Um, on the interactions piece, I'm probably pretty nerdy. I'm definitely introverted, uh, but in this role as a planner scheduler, you're forced to communicate with everybody, from the field folks to project management to owners, subcontractors. You're very much a vital conduit of information and communication, and I find that very rewarding, even as a kind of introverted person. Um, and I found, the reason I stayed in planning and scheduling after I got into it by accident, was I really like the influence that you could start to have at a young age to be able to portray risk to executives of the company you work for, start to troubleshoot, really act as the forecaster, the crystal ball, maybe for the company, and provide a level of value that's kind of hard to achieve as a project manager or as an estimator, where you're working, a pretty standard foundational ladder to get to the next step.
That's great. Thank you for telling us about that. I couldn't imagine you're an introvert, but I thought for planning scheduling, you need to really go out and speak with people, with the team. So that's amazing that no matter your personality type, you can still be successful in this field. So we talked all about the good things so far about project planning scheduling, but let's get some realities into here, especially for those who are not into the field and may be interested in getting into project planning scheduling. So what are some of the challenges, Daniel, that comes with this role as a project planner scheduler? What are some realities that you would like everyone to know about this role?
I think the largest challenge facing the industry right now, is partially due to the growth of planning and scheduling. Planning and scheduling over the past 30 years has really taken off. I know the company I work for now, 15 years ago, didn't even have a scheduling department, and now we're up to a department of 35 people. And the big driver of that growth across the industry has been the legal aspect of scheduling. So I think the big challenge kind of grows from that. And the challenge is we have, as an industry, have grown to create very complex schedules, very detailed schedules that legally protect ourselves. And the big challenge becomes, well, the schedule is a project management tool. It's a tool of communication. And when you get so detailed, sometimes it's hard for a project team to go, execute that schedule. And you may have foremen in the field, subcontractors in the field who are of varying sophistication levels with scheduling, various educational backgrounds. So the ability to both protect yourself legally with a schedule and also portray the schedule in a way that you can communicate and the field can go execute that schedule. I've always seen that as our biggest challenge right now. And there's a lot of things that have popped up. Lean is certainly not a new innovative thing, but integrating a CPM methodology with lean concepts has shown, at least on the general contractor side, great benefits to help the field to show better, schedule performance, because the schedule is a collaborative effort and it's communicated better. Things like TAC planning are kind of on the next wave of how we communicate schedules. But I think we've gotten to a point as an industry where we create, massive schedules, hundreds of pages of Gantt charts and schedule activities, and it may be perfectly technically sound and the logic is right, the durations are correct. We've used historical production rates to get to a really realistic place, But if that cannot be communicated to the folks who have to, put a shovel in the ground, then we're kind of failing. And that's kind of my feel for where the industry's at right now.
And you touched on a very good point about communication and many pages of the schedule that many don't relate or understand. And also, I like the fact that you mentioned it's a collaborative effort. So, and of course, the integration is also another aspect of integrating schedule with other elements of the project. But how do you make sure that the collaboration is in place? Because I have seen many planner schedulers who are working in ISO kind of isolation, don't really interact with the team or develop something that's really getting the buy-in from the team. That's one of the challenges I have faced. That's why nobody's looking at the schedule. They're saying, it's not my baby, it's yours, what you have developed. So what is your advice for those, to bring the collaboration in place? And second, how we can improve the communication of our schedules to the team so we can bring everyone on board, because there are a lot of effort goes into building a schedule, but how do you make sure that everyone is really getting buying into what we develop as project planner scheduler, and how we effectively communicate that to everyone in the team?
Yeah, my worst nightmare walking onto a project site or walking into a trailer conference room is to hear, "Hey, that's Dan's schedule." If it's Dan's schedule, then the schedule will fail. We will fail to execute Dan's schedule. It needs to be the team schedule. In many ways, I want to hear the superintendent, the field team say that it's their schedule and they control the schedule. How you get to that point is honestly a little bit of humility. I've seen a lot of schedulers who enjoy working in the silo. They enjoy building a schedule on their own, going through drawings and specs. But again, they may build a technically perfect schedule, but when they transition it to the team that actually has to go build it, it will fail because that team was not part of the collaborative effort. So for me, the approach has always been more or less a humble approach of, "Hey, I can't do this without you, and we need to do this together, and I will not do it without you." And generally, execution improves communication further down the line. If the whole team, stakeholders from owners, subcontractors, foremen, are involved in that effort, then the piece of communicating the schedule just gets a whole lot easier because everybody's bought into the process. And really, that is what Last Planner is all about. That is what TAC planning is all about, is broadening the reach, making the schedule effort more collaborative so that the stakeholders, the people who actually go build in the field, are bought into what the schedule and the plan says.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, collaboration is very key. And you also address about the challenges with the lean. Can you elaborate more on that thought that you mentioned so everybody is on board of what you mean exactly?
Sure. So when I talk about lean and Last Planner system, essentially Last Planner system, and this is the way I describe it to our superintendents, is this is what you've always done. It's just a fancier name. And it's an organizational structure to be consistent day in, day out, week in, week out, so that we're doing things the same way. We're communicating to the right people in a consistent way throughout the life cycle of the project. So sometimes that means we're using weekly work plans out in our field trailers to go into more detail, more granular detail than the schedule actually is. Some of that is pull planning. If we get to a sticky area of a project where maybe the initial plan isn't working, it's good to bring everybody in a room and get back to a pull planning session with the sticky notes, or digitally if you're using some of the new softwares that digitally will do pull planning. But essentially, it is just a way to communicate the schedule. I like to try and demystify it a little bit, because sometimes a new name, a fancy name, is a barrier to adoption for some of our folks in the field.
Yes, definitely. Thanks for clarifying that. We have some questions now on the topics that we discussed, and some great questions on some other topics that we will discuss later that I will ask you later on. But there's a question which you can see that on the screen by Subria. So the question, like when we talk about communication, we have pages and pages of the schedule, how do you effectively communicate that? So the question is, how do you feel about Power BI and integrating Power BI with your project schedule? Have you had the experience of that? And if you can share your thoughts on integration of your schedule with Power BI.
Sure. Yeah, we use Power BI. We have a monthly dashboard, a weekly dashboard that we look at to both look at forecasts and risks. I think the key with all things data and scheduling, because what is a schedule but a vast data network that can be mined for a variety of reasons. The key is getting all those stakeholders together and agreeing what the KPIs are. What are we going to measure? What do we want to look at, and at what frequency? And if that whole team is on board, then absolutely, it's a great way to look at a whole organizational schedule health, look at individual schedules and different areas of schedules. I'm a big fan of dashboards. We've spent a lot of time customizing our dashboards. I know there's a lot of out of the box kind of options out there in the market that are great. From what I've seen, there's a lot out there that could really help folks, but we have really leaned into a customized solution because we've spent the hours to put together an algorithm of the QC elements of the schedule that are most important to us, of the performance elements when you do a comparative between schedules that mean the most to us, the EVM elements, whether it's percentage complete or looking at S curves, really pulling in the whole team, especially the end user, whether that's an executive at the top of an organization or it's a foreman who's out there digging in the dirt. Having them bought into what we're actually going to look at goes a long way.
Yeah, exactly. Especially with current software that we have, I think they don't have good capabilities of extracting visual data from the schedule. Even P6, and regardless of all the advancement, I don't see that's capable. So definitely integration with Power BI would definitely help, as long as it's a good quality information that we're analyzing, right? But yeah, and also automating, like with the integration with Power BI, we can automate some of those reporting and save time in producing the reports and hopefully do more analysis. So thank you so much for that, and great question, Subrija. So we have another question by John on the planning scheduling on mechanical electrical pumping area. I don't know exactly the context of the question, but to me, like the same concept applied to every industry. So what are your thoughts on that question, Daniel?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, just coming from a contractor's perspective and even a consultant's perspective, MEP is often the area in which schedules are worst detailed. The biggest thing that frustrates me is to see an activity that says MEP rough and doesn't break out the individual trades. And for me, that's always a no-no, because you can't really grade how folks are doing. You can't really understand performance, but I think it goes to and I talk from a pure construction standpoint because that's the industry in which I plan and schedule. But being more than Primavera or being more than Microsoft Project and actually being a builder, understanding how those systems come together. What does a real sequence to get to permanent power look like? What does it look like to get construction air moving, startup? That's what makes a good scheduler, less than, a P6 expert. So when I'm out and I'm looking to hire folks, I don't really grade P6 skills. There are a lot of P6 experts out there, and that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a true builder. So that's true for construction. If you're a planner scheduler in oil and gas, knowing that trade backwards and forwards, being able to read drawings, understand the project the same way a superintendent or a project manager would, it starts to break down the issues we see with MEP. I understand the question. It's a troubled area in construction scheduling.
Okay, great. Thanks for shedding more light on that. You also you talked about interactive planning sessions, and we have a question on that. On what are your thoughts on project control plan, which to me is different than the interactive planning sessions. But what are your thoughts on interactive planning session with those sticky notes on the wall, having everyone here in the room talking about the schedule, developing, building something really valuable, which takes a lot of teams' time. But how often do you do that? Like, do you do that for every project? Do you do that for big projects? Or what are your thoughts on interactive planning sessions, Daniel? And for what type of projects do you recommend definitely doing it?
Yeah, I mean, I recommend it on every project. That collaborative effort is essential to the schedule actually being executed. Now, in our business, we have a lot of repetitive product types where, the schedule can more or less be templated, and we don't necessarily need to go through a full interactive planning session, take a data all build out in the data center. Generally, those look pretty similar from one to the other, and we can template the schedule development there. But on big risky projects, if we're not doing that collaborative effort, then we will fail. And to use pull planning as an example, I mean, I've always, and maybe I'm old school in this way, but I've always argued against some of the digital pull planning tools because I really feel like there is a tactile memory piece of writing on a sticky note, putting it on a board, and committing to those around you that I'm going to adhere to this duration, this sequence, this date. It's human interaction. In construction, it's nothing more than a people business. So that level of commitment and accountability to each other is what breeds successful projects.
Definitely. Yes, Daniel. Thank you for that. Also, in your discussion, you mentioned when you want to hire someone to join your team, you're looking not just in P6 scheduling skills, but also if they know the industry and if they know how to build the schedule. So what other qualities a planner scheduler need to have? A high-performing project planner scheduler, your A player in the team. What skills do you recommend people to acquire to be really successful in project planning scheduling, Daniel?
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to make it seem like the technical skills of building a schedule, updating a schedule, looking at the data, seeing progress curves, being able to forecast. I don't mean to diminish those skills. Those are very important. But I do feel like those are skills that are easier taught than the soft skills that make a planner scheduler successful. So being able to interact with people, being able to delve into a conflict between two people and resolve it. I mean, too often I think our planner schedulers become a marriage counselor between a superintendent in the field and a project manager in the office. But those are the folks who build a following and build their influence and really build accountability into the schedule that they've technically built through these soft skills, through the human interaction they have with people. That is really what sets the best schedulers apart, is an ability to manage conflict, to manage different stakeholders that can be all sorts of different sophistication levels with scheduling. Your field personnel may not have even thought about attending college, and your office staff are all college educated, maybe highly college educated. How you communicate to those two different stakeholders is different at times, but the ability to play in both arenas is really, really important. And I can't stress that enough. And it's something hard when you're recruiting and hiring to necessarily identify. We do a lot of kind of scenario planning when we do interviews, when we get to final rounds of interviews, where we'll put people in a situation and want to understand how are you going to interact in this situation, because that is truer to the real job that they're going to do every day than hey, I'm going to give you 3 sets of drawings. Can you show me how you build out a WBS for a garage? That a lot of people can learn those skills and demonstrate them, but the soft skills are the ones that get you ahead.
Yes, absolutely. And I like the fact that you mentioned you put them in a situation to do something before hiring. So not just relying on the resume, but actually to see if they can do this, and like a test project. So That's awesome. So, considering all the challenges to getting into project planning scheduling, and for those who are new into this field, what are your advice for newbies in project planning scheduling? If you can give them three pieces of advice so that if they are listening here, they know what the next step would be for them and how they can advance into this career to be really successful, what would be the advice for them, Daniel?
So I'll lean on my own personal experience. I think the best thing for you to do when you're new in this career is to find a good mentor and lean into good mentorship. And you may not have that in the organization you're at, but you can find it through networks like Project Control Academy. I have a lot of people who have mentored me who I've never physically met, and they've meant a lot to me in my career. So I think really leaning into mentorship, having a humble approach, being willing to learn, be willing to be corrected, is an important quality if you want to get ahead. Because the reality is, a lot of the people we see succeed the most in planning and scheduling generally started their career somewhere else. And we kind of joke that it's an accidental profession. For me, it was. I never intended to be a scheduler, but that's where I ended up, and it was the right place for me. But the reality is, the best schedulers probably came from a superintendent, again, strictly construction industry knowledge here, but they came from the field, or they came from an accounting background, or they came from, an estimating background. They had some knowledge, the building blocks to build the schedule knowledge upon. The reality is that is not how planning and scheduling professionals are growing now. People are truly coming out of university and starting that career. So finding ways to get those building blocks without necessarily sitting in those roles for several years is really important. So whether it's pushing your organization to have some kind of rotational program where you can get some of those experiences outside of a pure, data entry P6 role is really important, because you can very easily get specialized early in your career and really become a software expert. And I can't stress enough how important it is to not be a software expert, especially with how the industry is changing, how technology is changing. Having that strong foundation is the thing that continues your career. When AI comes forward, or when technology really makes the industry pivot, which in reality we're kind of on the precipice of that.
Yes, very well said, Daniel. Yeah, I totally agree with you. But what would be the first step for a newbie? Yes, you mentioned about the mentor, and talking about the mentor, we just started a mentorship program in Project Professional Network. So if you just Google it, Project Professional Network, and join that. It's free, so you can even match up with a mentor if that's something that you're interested. But in addition to mentorship and getting guidance, how I know you said the foundation is important, especially those who are coming from the construction, from the field, know how things are built, know the sequence of work, know things beyond the paper, really would make that strong planner schedulers. But if someone, as you said, might come from accounting, how they can build that strong foundation? Do you recommend them to go first into field and gain some field experience, and at the same time enhance their knowledge into the software for planning scheduling? How they can build that strong foundation you are referring to, Daniel, as the first step after, of course, the mentorship?
Yeah, I think for a construction planner scheduler, the best thing that can happen to you early in your career is to be full time on a project and sit in the trailer and walk the job site every day and find the superintendent and ask them the questions that you're afraid to ask. And sometimes you got to find the right people to field those questions. But if you aren't asking those questions, how does formwork come together to pour concrete? Or, what is a reshore? Or how does startup look like for a mechanical system? If you are not in the position to have the opportunity to ask those questions, find the opportunity to ask those questions, because that is the basis on which your career will take off. It's not just the the data entry piece, where you sit at a desk in front of a computer and can really make Primavera sing and dance. There's a lot of people who can do that. And when folks like myself are looking for someone to take us to the next level, that is not what we're looking for. I'd almost prefer people to be software agnostic. If someone could come in and show me that they can do a manual backwards and forwards pass, but they've never touched P6, I will hire that person.
Wow, really?
Yes.
That's amazing. That's the right mentality. That's great. And unfortunately, most of us first get into planning scheduling by learning the software as the first step. So I'm glad that you're reversing this and encouraging people to learn the foundation, how software works behind the scene, gaining some experience into the field, and then learning software. So thank you. Great advice. And I know there are a lot of questions on the AI and the future. Just stay tuned, everyone. We get to those questions, no worries. I know everyone is excited about, okay, how AI is impacting planning scheduling. But before we get there, just a few more questions on the career path. Especially in project controls, as we know, there are not really clear career path, and especially for planning scheduling. So what would be your recommended career path for those who are in planning scheduling to move to the next step, or those who are interested in getting it? So having some clarity on the career path. What career path do you suggest for people in this field?
Yeah, I heavily suggest early in your career, the first 5 years of your career, you perform in a role that is not planning and scheduling. For construction, you may be an assistant field manager, or you may be an assistant project manager, or you may be an estimator. That is a great place to start. And when we bring in folks from university, we make sure we're getting some of that rotational learning because it makes them a better planner scheduler in the end. They may have decided, they may have co-opted or interned with us within our scheduling department and said, this is for me. This is what I want to do. I love the data aspect of it. I love blending the field and the office. This is what I've imagined for my career. It is still best for them to get a taste of those other roles because in reality, most organizations' planning and scheduling is a support service. And in order to really make an impact in the support service, you need to understand the people you're serving. Because there's a customer service element of it, and understanding their job and the day-to-day needs that they have can make you really impactful. In terms of, a standardized career path, there really is no standard. It's very different. Everywhere I've worked, the career path within planning and scheduling has been different. But I have seen over several years now, all these organizations really trying to get clarity on what the ladder should look like and what the skills are to go from an entry level position to kind of a mid-level position to that senior level position. When do you start having managers? What is the correct number of planner and schedulers for an individual manager? And the reality here in construction is a lot of the general contractors like ourselves are pretty new in maturity. They're pretty young in having a scheduling department. And unfortunately, some of them are making it up on the fly. But organizations like AACE have put out recommended practices for what a good career ladder should look like, what the skills are at each one of those positions. By year 5, you ought to have some kind of claims knowledge. You can do fragnets. You can do a TIA. This is not something that you can necessarily build into a career path, but in my experience, really tough projects that maybe go poorly, have gone wrong, build great schedulers, right? When you come off of that very difficult project, you now know what to look for. So don't shy away from those projects. Don't be intimidated by that big giant project that has some claim action going on, or you may know is already 6 weeks behind, because that's a place where you start to learn how you can have an impact in an organization on a project. That's really where your role gets clarified, and iron sharpens iron.
Yeah, exactly. And you kind of briefly referred to the claims and those type of areas. So, and I know you've been involved in schedule delay claim analysis. So, would it be the ultimate skill sets that someone in planning scheduling to gain on forensic delay analysis and delay claims? Do you recommend those who are in the path also get exposed to those type of things?
I do, not necessarily being an expert in every methodology of time impact analysis, but having a working knowledge of not necessarily claims, but dispute resolution and how we potentially avoid disputes. Because in a typical scheduler role, there will be conflicts, there will be delays, and you need to think about how to document them properly in a legal manner that protects the organization you're working for. So I don't think at a young age it's necessarily the most important, but exposure to it is certainly a feather in your cap.
Exactly. Thank you so much for clarifying that. Now let's go to the heated discussion that everyone was interested to get your insights on. Daniel, about the current trends and future trends in project planning scheduling, especially with the invention of AI. I have personally seen some new software has been developed that are AI based, kind of building the schedule based on the knowledge base that they have, or a lot of AI are coming into the picture for even developing the schedule. So where are we now in terms of the technology? I mean, the leading companies right now, and where we are heading in the future, especially in planning scheduling. What are your thoughts on that?
So I would say with regard to AI, it's here, it's real. And part of the reason I'm stressing so much the software expert piece is I think those are the folks who get weeded out of the industry with the advent of AI. I don't think planning and I've heard people say planning and scheduling, within an organization, they're the new draftsmen. We don't see draftsmen around here anymore. What happened to them? I don't think that's the reality of planning and scheduling. I do think it is likely to dramatically change the way we approach our jobs. And the more that you have that foundational experience and knowledge, the less scary that is. And you will be okay. Obviously, the horizon of AI on any industry is a little bit frightening in terms of job security, and I don't necessarily see it that way. But where we're at right now with AI, I think there's several different buckets where AI plugs into planning and scheduling. There is almost the chat GPT approach to a schedule that starts to delve into this communication issue I've talked about, where you have got a massive schedule that folks can't understand, where you have a schedule chatbot that you say, hey, when are we topping out building a structure, and it can return that information, mines the schedule, returns that information. The technology is there for that to exist here and now, and there are several organizations who are kind of racing to be the first to do that. Language modeling, where we're at with language modeling with AI, it is also here, and it's very real, and it has the ability to automatically code an entire P6 database based on trade. Machine learning learns, how activity descriptions are written typically across an organization. And now some of these manual processes, potentially in P6, that an organization will struggle to consistently do, machine learning can do for us. Those are two things that are here, that are now, that are real. I think the two pieces in planning and scheduling with AI that get talked about the most are AI for schedule development, kind of generative AI, where you can take some historical schedules and a project of a similar size, access a database, and develop a schedule using AI. The second side is the progress capture side of AI, where a schedule can be automatically updated. My personal opinion, I think the schedule development, the generative AI, is probably where we go, and probably where the industry is affected the most. I have not seen the progress capture side of AI really be effective. And unfortunately, that's where a lot of kind of the VC money is right now out there with software companies is they're approaching, how do we, walk a spot the dog robot from Boston Dynamics around a job site with a 360 camera. Then we compare the 360 images to the BIM model, and we can understand what our actual progress is and update a schedule automatically. There's a lot of flawed assumptions in that whole process about how a construction job actually comes through. But I have seen the industry and I have seen players in the software space for the generative AI for schedule development, where I do think that is a very real thing that we will contend with in the next few years. And it's typical to all industries. Repetitive functions are where AI is going to play out the most. And most of our time as planner schedulers is in the planning phase when we build schedules. So that it doesn't scare me. I actually kind of look forward to what that brings. I don't think it's really giving you a final, starting gun schedule to begin your project with, but it will take away a lot of the bulk effort that takes up a lot of time.
Yes, exactly. Well said, Daniel. Yeah, if we can get to that point of automatic progress update, then I don't think we need any planner schedulers at that point, but I think that's a far future. But I totally agree with you in terms of the application of AI in already some software. I have also seen the impact of it. Some really have really looking into these details, but I think it's boiled down to the database and how good quality data we are feeding into this. As you said, repetitive items, we can definitely give that to AI based on machine learning, but are we doing a good job in building the schedules? Do we have a good standard? I mean, kind of standardizing our schedule development so that we can get the help of AI. So there are a lot of barriers still that I think it prevents us from even tapping into AI, but also accuracy at the moment is a question, like how reliable those AI-based schedules are. But yeah, as you said, the signs are here. It's already here. So, but how we get into full AI-based scheduling, we don't know. Do you have any prediction when it's going to happen, Daniel?
I mean, I've seen proof enough that CPM schedules can be developed in a way that is fairly accurate to historical data. If there's a vast, robust database of historical data, that a fairly accurate schedule can be built. I've not seen it on the schedule maintenance piece. Some of the barriers there, when you're walking your camera around, is there enough light in the building? Or how often are you walking your camera around? Or is your BIM model truly accurate to even be compared to? And those point at almost fatalistic flaws in that whole process, because some of that will never change. And it's just the reality of construction. So I do think it's here. I think, the more that folks can have a basic computer science background, baseline knowledge of some coding structures, the ability to harness data out of a schedule, I think you're fine in the future if you have some of those skills. But we exist in an industry that is slow to change and doesn't have a lot of willingness to change or innovate. So it will be, I'm not going to put a year date on it for sure, but it will be a difficult transition, I believe.
Very good. And I see a good comment here about AI and the use of it, especially for claims and reviewing the impact and like TIA based on historical data. Do you think that would be really going that path?
Absolutely. I mean, you talk to claims consultants, and so much of their time is researching, finding data, pulling data, organizing data, and that's what AI is best at. I think, there's been a lot written about how AI is going to first impact the legal profession more so than any others because of discovery and things like that, where the language models for AI can automatically, go do it, or just writing briefs. I think we are fairly close to a point where reporting can be done in an automated fashion through AI. So that's where a claims consultant is going to see the impact for sure.
That's great. So one final question before we open the floor to the audience question is, now with all this evolution that are happening in the industry, Daniel, what future readiness skills we need to have to be ready for AI, for any new things that coming our way? As we said, a lot of repetitive stuff can be replaced by a machine, by AI, or so what we need to be investing in ourselves now to be ready for whatever future is throwing at us later.
Yeah, I think if you are a planning and scheduling professional and you're a little frightened by AI and what it might do, I would spend some time learning some basic coding skills. If it doesn't change, if the industry stays the same way, you're going to be very useful with Power BI. You're going to be very useful with data analytics. And that is where the industry is going, is harnessing data. There is a very good case to be made, at least on a general contractor's perspective, of marrying the data of schedule performance with your safety performance, with your financial performance, and starting to see how trends converge or diverge based on some of that. And I think anybody who has cultivated skills like that are going to be on the front wave, and they're going to be just okay, with technology pivoting. And again, I think it is a willingness to change. And I work in construction. Construction is probably the industry that is least willing to change. But the reality is it's here, it's not going anywhere, and your job will likely change. I think having a working knowledge of the BIM model and how to navigate a BIM model, and understanding how you can tie a BIM model to a scheduler, to a cost database, again, it is a skill that will be useful in the future. That's where I see things going.
And Daniel, BIM has been around for a while. I know not everyone knows how to tap into that yet. There are a lot of moving parts, a lot of stakeholders, a lot of team collaboration involved for BIM. But do you recommend even getting to know BIM and 4D planning as the next step as well?
Not necessarily 4D planning. I do think 4D has its place. It starts to tackle part of that problem we talked about communicating a very detailed schedule. What's better than an animation that shows you exactly how things are going to come together? But I do think there are barriers to 4D where we have seen 4D kind of plateau, I think. And we've gone through kind of a 4D journey here at Brassfield and Gorey that has helped us understand where it works and where it doesn't, and where we can plug in and where we ought maybe not. But I do think having a working knowledge of how a BIM model comes together, how to navigate a BIM model, slice and dice, see things differently in a BIM model, is very, very helpful for a planning and scheduling professional. So seeking out that kind of knowledge, whether it's software-based knowledge in Revit or Navisworks or whatever is being used at a given organization, is only going to help you for sure.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much. That's great. Great advice, Daniel. So we have a few more minutes left, if you don't mind me to open the floor to some other questions that we didn't discuss here. Let me go to the question. So we have a question by Dr. Sridhar about the role of EVM in planning. As you know, earned value management works best when it's properly integrated with our schedule, but most of us are not doing a good job of integrating cost with our schedule properly. So EVM usually falls apart. The cost portion of it is really accurate, but when it comes to schedule, it's not. So what are your advice about that, incorporating EVM into your schedule, and how you go about effective EVM implementation in projects?
Yeah, I mean, I think just the basic philosophy of earned value is there in a lot of what we do in comparative metrics. Do we do earned value management to the T, to the letter of the law? We don't. we use it on projects where it's probably spec'd. But I do think EVM colors the way in which we look at KPIs. So there was a question earlier about KPIs through Power BI. How do you create an effective Power BI dashboard? If you are not caught up on earned value management, how you can tie cost and scheduling together, then you are missing out on seeing the full picture in a Power BI dashboard of schedule performance, cost performance. So I wouldn't necessarily say I'm an expert in EVM. I've certainly dabbled. And one of the main barriers I've seen is again, this piece of getting a program too complicated for the end users to be able to understand. And sometimes it's difficult to get an executive level person or a foreman level person bought off on some of these EVM concepts or how they really impact their day to day. So there's a training element that's important when you first set out to kind of build EVM concepts into a planning and scheduling program. I don't know that I answered that question very well, but those are kind of my thoughts where I stand. I mean, we utilize S curves, we utilize percent complete, we cost load some of our schedules and have that data integrated. Sometimes it feels like the juice is not worth the squeeze for us as a contractor, and it really plays best for a program manager. But I wouldn't say I'm an evangelist of EVM, but I'm definitely not a detractor.
Yeah, definitely. It's really a challenge to integrate both cost into your schedule. Actually, we have a comprehensive course on that, EVM implementation in Primavera P6, and it's down to your setting and also it's just a lot going behind the scenes. So if anyone interested, you can explore that. Just go to Project Control Academy and check the training. That's exactly one training on just that, EVM in P6. But yeah, it's not easy. It's really a challenge. But I believe if someone knows and can integrate costs into the schedule, they can really make wonders in the project, but I understand it's not easy. So I fully agree with you, Daniel, on that part.
And I think part of it is just the limitations of P6, because P6 is the most used tool. That's where most of us operate, and P6 is not built in a way that allows EVM to be fully utilized.
And not only that, I think there are also a flaw in EVM when it comes to scheduling metrics. So especially at the end of the project, SPI is 1, schedule variance 0. So that's why earned schedule came into the picture. So I think that would be a good, as you said, good indicators to understand. There might be some underlying issues with the schedule. Go deep dive and understand. But yeah, to the full integration, still I haven't seen that properly been implemented. EVM fully inside the schedule. We are teaching how to do that, but again, it's not that easy. But thank you so much for that great question as well here. So we have another great question here, Daniel, which is highlighted here. If you can also share more about flow-based scheduling in oil and gas revamp project, or basically flow-based scheduling. Have you been exposed to flow-based scheduling, Daniel? Any thoughts on that?
I have. I mean, obviously, my experience does not lend itself to oil and gas, but through AACE and my chairmanship, I get exposed to that a lot. Flow-based scheduling. So, for me, I automatically bring it back to construction and crew flow and kind of TAC planning concepts. And I guess my experience as a consultant for subcontractors primarily has colored the way I schedule trade flow, in that, as a general contractor, you're looking at your schedule and you're thinking primarily, how do I get to the end date? How do I meet my interim milestones? What is best for the project? A subcontractor, when they're looking at a schedule, they're thinking about, how am I moving this crew from this project to this project to this project? And how do I keep them efficient? And how do I make money by having no downtime, by not being late on my dates, to truly be efficient from program to program to program? So for me, flow-based scheduling is no different than that. And, we talk about, CPM basics, hard logic, soft logic. Obviously, all your hard logic has to be in the schedule or it won't make sense. we often preach we want to reduce our soft logic to just the things that you need so that you don't create a giant spider web of logic and you can't unwind it. But that soft logic, that crew-based thinking, that planning element is something that I've seen in construction is not done enough, and can sometimes be the main culprit for why specifically an interior schedule will go the wrong way. There's lots of data that you can show that schedules do great through structure, through skin. They generally keep their plan as long as there's not a dramatic impact. But that phase transition, when you move into an interiors trade flow, is where things start to break down. So for me, when I hear flow-based scheduling, that is where I go.
Thank you so much for that. And for those of you who are interested in flow-based scheduling, perhaps I have a good recommendation. Check Realization Technologies. They are so much into flow-based scheduling, and you can get a lot of great resources there. Just go check that out. We had some master classes with them, and they're really doing great things in flow-based scheduling. So just check them out if you're interested. So perhaps we are down to one last question. I know we are just on time, but if you don't mind, one more minute for this final question here. Daniel, which is highlighted there by John. It's about 4D planning that we just talked. Here he's asking, what about the documentation before you having a 4D model and later communication and validation? Any thoughts on that, Daniel?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, John. A 4D animation is truly just the construction installation, and that is not all that makes a project. The design piece, the procurement, permitting, if you are not paying close attention to those things and building a robust schedule and planning your team, having a collaborative effort with your team, including the owners and any third parties, then you're not even going to get to that animation part where things go pretty and nice. So I think, there's no way to necessarily visualize that within a BIM model. And your point is well taken on commissioning and final inspections as well. Those are not things that you can necessarily demonstrate in a 4D model. For me, 4D modeling is all about communication to your trade partners and subs, and that's the power of 4D modeling. Those things outside, those administrative tasks, you can't live on a 4D model alone.
Exactly. Well said. Another question just came, which is a very good one. So, any thoughts on schedule basis documentations?
Yeah, I mean, there are, I could give you my thoughts on it, but there are fantastic resources out there on schedule basis documentation and the correct way to do that. Whether it's an AACE recommended practice or, a training through Project Control Academy, absolutely important. It's all about starting up the process correctly, getting everybody on the same page. Do we have a formal schedule basis documentation process here at Brassfield and Gorey? We don't, but we do have a formal startup process for schedule development that I'd argue is achieving the same things. But setting those guideposts from the very beginning is very important to make sure, number one, that you're consistent across an organization, and number two, that everybody's on the same page through the whole project lifecycle. That's a great point, a great question.
Exactly. And as you mentioned, Daniel, I also highly recommend you check the vast majority of resources at AACE International. They have great recommended practices, great things like some of you were asking about project control plan. They have recommended practice on that. A lot of great resources in there. For me, like the virtual library of AACE is always my to-go source for anything I want to find, and then Google. So it just, go check that out. A lot of great resources are available at AACE. And we have Daniel from AACE as well, the AACE chair for planning and scheduling committee. So that was really good. Thank you so much. I think we covered all the questions from the audience. So I really appreciate your time, Daniel, for sharing your valuable insights with the audience, shedding more light on the career path and how we can get better in this role role in planning, scheduling, and AI futures. So a lot of things we discussed. So thank you so much for your time here. I also appreciate everyone who joined us today live, asking so many great questions here. Just before we adjourn the session, I have a quick invite to everyone. If you don't know, next year we are having our annual conference, Project Control Summit, in person in Galveston Island, Texas. I warmly invite every one of you to join us in there. We will be happy to see you there. And today is the last day to get the best out of this summit. The tickets are 50% off. Only today, it's going to end today. So if you're interested, check that out. I will put that here. Just go to projectcontrolsummit.com/flash-sale. So don't miss that opportunity if anyone is interested to join us. And hopefully we can have Daniel joining us there too. We haven't finalized any speaker yet, but hopefully we can have him joining us at the summit as well. But it's a warm invitation to anyone who is interested in joining us at the conference. So any final thoughts, Daniel, before we adjourn the session? Any final advice to the attendees?
No, I mean, I would just say thank you for having me, and thank you for all these great questions. I'm sort of blown away by, number one, all where your audience is coming from worldwide, and some really great questions here that kind of challenge me mentally. I feel like I've done my mental gymnastics today.
Really? No, it was really great discussion, Daniel. Thank you so much for everything. We really appreciate your time and really sharing your insights on this. I know when it comes to career, it's not that much exposed or not that much discussion. I hope that added value to everyone, but really thank you for your time. And as soon as we approached Daniel for this session, he said yes, and he was all for it. So we cannot thank you enough, Daniel. Thank you so much for this great session. For everyone who jumped in like in the middle of it, don't worry, the recording will be available on LinkedIn, on YouTube, as well as Facebook. So YouTube and LinkedIn for under Project Control Academy, you can check them out. But I'm sure we have to come back to this session several times to kind of fully digest that. But thank you so much, Daniel. A big shout out to everyone who joined from different corners of this globe, tuned in to learn something new today. I hope that added value to you. So in 2 weeks, we will see you with another fantastic session with another great expert on another topic. So until then, I hope you have a great day. Thank you, everyone. Bye
Thanks.
for now. Thank you.